All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the Minnesota Vikings, and I am joined by Craig Williams, writer for the Daily Norseman and the Purple PTSD. How's it going?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Actually, talking about the Purple PTSD, I had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
I did see a T-shirt, and being a Vikings fan, it said, uh, gosh, disappointed since 1960 something, and I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen that.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much the history of never quite getting there, having the dominant defenses in the 70s and not finishing it off, and then obviously the disappointment in the 90s with Moss and Carter and everybody, and then continuing on when we had Favre, and then just a few years ago when we had Case Keenum going nuts and had to. We thought would be a home Super Bowl in our grasps, and letting a backup quarterback in Philly take us down. I mean, we just never quite finish it off.
Tell you what, yeah, I spent about 10 years in Minnesota, various places, and I was actually, in the area, and went to I lived in Mankato during the Favre years, so I had a chance to see training camp and see firsthand a lot of that heartbreak there.
Yeah, it's still hard to comprehend how they never quite finished that off. It just seems to be impossible. What happened in New Orleans?
Yeah, and so a lot in the past, but there's a lot to talk about, kind of in the future for the Vikings as well. And let's just kind of get into the first news. Obviously, today we heard that Aaron Rodgers is signing, to stay on with the Packers.
Yeah.
So when you look at the Vikings, what does this Aaron Rodgers news mean for the Vikings playoff window?
Um, I think it's kind of sticking where it is. I think they're going to want to compete still. I don't think that's going to scare them off from signing Kirk Cousins and trying to step back into it. I think. I mean, Green Bay doesn't seem to be this unstoppable force. I mean, they have an excellent record, obviously, every year with Aaron Rodgers, but especially with the salary they signed him at, they're gonna be losing some talent. They already weren't a unstoppable team. I think it's something that's not going to scare the Vikings away at all.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, the Packers is big news for them, big news within the division. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to it than just one piece, as we kind of know from me being a Bears fan and you a Vikings guy, and let's just talk about some of those pieces from the Vikings from last year. With the draft class last year, what are some kind of grades and what do you see from that class? Just from the production on the field from last year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of disappointments in that draft class last year, but there definitely were some standouts. I mean, Christian Darrisaw looks to be our left tackle of the future. I mean, he's not. I wouldn't say he's going to be an All-Pro caliber player, but he looks to be a solid NFL quality player that can last for many years to come. I think Cam Bynum, safety coming out of there in the mid rounds is going to be huge. So now they don't have to go back and overpay to kind of keep a veteran player around. They can have him slide in, and that's going to save some money and help with that Kirk Cousins cap hit that we know is coming. And Wangwu is he's a solid, exciting player that can add a dynamic to that offense. An excellent kick returner. We know kick returns aren't as huge as they used to be, but we still get one or two strong returns out of him a year. He had a kick return for a touchdown that helped out the team a lot. I think that's an exciting player that's somebody that Kevin O'Connell can really use and scheme around, which the Vikings did not do at all last year. I mean, the rest of the draft is really just it's been a bit of a disappointment. Wyatt Davis has been a player that I was so excited about when they drafted him, and he couldn't get on the field at all. Even when there were injuries piling up, he saw no action. So I don't know what happened with him. If it was just in the doghouse with Zimmer, or if he just wasn't up to snuff. But I'm hoping it's just an issue with Zimmer, and he can step forward. The guard spots are still a huge need for this team. Interior offensive line is a huge weakness. I think Kellen Mond. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, he was an impressive player in college, but not really somebody that was considered to be a top prospect. He has some potential, but he looked horrible in the preseason. I mean, he just didn't look anywhere near ready. So I was happy when they drafted him, but I don't know if he's going to be the guy or not, and they probably won't see for several years anyway.
Well, yeah, and you wonder if that part of that was just the coaching as well, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I mean, Mike Zimmer's staff was about as least flexible. It's the worst. They were the least flexible in the league. It feels like when it's playing young players and having creative ideas and managing an offense, and it seems to be the complete opposite with this new coaching staff coming in.
Yeah, and one player I wanted to, ask about as well, because I'm an Iowa guy, and
Yeah.
I did get a chance to go to the last game of the season, and obviously Ihmir Smith-Marsette balled out. Does he have a place in this offense, or where do you see him fitting?
Yeah, I think he has a niche spot. I mean, I think he's a solid number 4 wide receiver. I don't think he's going to do much more than that. He's the guy that can take a top off the offense or off the defense there, but he's not somebody that's going to come in and give you 80 to 100 catches and 1,000 yards. I don't ever see that as a future for him. I see him as that guy that gets 20 catches a year for 4 or 500 yards could be his top. And those are all just big gains and kind of shots down the field where he can just get that single coverage when they're looking at Jefferson and Thielen and everybody else, and you can get that single coverage and open it up and make a big play.
Yeah, and so Jefferson, he's definitely the guy, there. But Thielen is he's been his guy in his own right. I mean, what is his future with the Vikings?
He's under contract for another 3 years. I mean, next they have no chance of trading or cutting him this year. I think they'd have to eat $11.5 million in dead cap. So he's definitely at least one more year in purple. I more likely 2 years in purple, and then maybe a restructure extension or something like that happens. I mean, I see him right now as the Chris Carter type role. I mean, he catches touchdowns. He catches anything that's near him. He has the best hands on the team. He just doesn't have that top end speed that he used to. He was a sneaky fast player, I think, in his prime. He's on the downside of the career, but he's still. I mean, he makes everything that's thrown to him. He never drops the ball. He's always making the unbelievable catches. So I think he has a strong role with his team if he can stay healthy. I mean, he's missed a handful of games the last 3 years. I think he played 16 games in 2018. I think was his last year he played 16. Well, 17, I guess it would be now. But he. I think he's still a strong number 2 wide receiver, and I don't think he can really top that at very many spots in the league.
Yeah, and so when you have those receivers, there's an abundance of receivers with the Vikings. I mean, even and you had another young receiver come on this year as well, and I don't know if that's a lot to do with Kirk Cousins. What do you see as far as I mean, are you a Kirk Cousins apologist, or what side are you on this? This is Vikings Twitter is amazing, by the way.
Yeah, I guess I'm somewhere in between. I'm not a big Kirk Cousins fan. I don't think he's going to be the quarterback that wins you the big game. When you just need that touchdown at the end of the game, he doesn't time and time again. He doesn't step up and make it happen. I think he's the guy that's going to win you a lot of games. He's better than most. He's a top 10-ish, maybe top 10 to 15 quarterback, somewhere in that range. Me personally, I put him around 12, 13. I don't think he's ever going to be a high end quarterback. There's always going to be 5, 6 guys that are better than him, and when you get to the playoffs, you're going to get a team that just has a better quarterback. And unless he gets lined up with the purple people eaters, he's just never going to win a championship.
Yeah, Cousins is such an interesting case because he played really, really well, early on. And when you look at him, what quarterbacks would you say you definitely would have? You would take Kirk Cousins over these quarterbacks in the NFL right now?
Man, that's tough.
Probably
I
a
mean,
short list.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously somebody like Baker Mayfield is kind of in that range.
Mhm.
I would take Kirk over Baker. I would take Kirk over, those kind of middle of the road guys. I mean, Stafford just won a Super Bowl, so it's hard to criticize him. But I always saw Stafford and Kirk as a very similar player.
Mhm.
The Stafford is just so much tougher and more likable as a guy than Kirk is. So I think that's what his guys kind of rally around him more than you see guys rally around Kirk. So I would have taken Stafford over Kirk just because of that locker room presence, and I feel like the guys kind of rally around him in the locker room more. I don't really see that with Kirk. There aren't players that are like, that's my quarterback, that's my guy. Like even the wide receiver. I mean, Jefferson. I mean, they get along. There's no issue. He's not like a diva or anything, but he's not sitting there like, yeah, that's my guy. That's Kirk. I wouldn't want to play with anybody else. You don't hear that about him. You hear Devontae Adams talk about Aaron Rodgers, and he's just glowing every time they talk about him. So he's never going to be that guy. I guess Russell Wilson had a bad year this year, and I still probably would take him over Kirk. But
Mm-hmm.
seeing what the Broncos just gave up for Russell makes me excited to see that there might be potential out there.
Yeah. So talk about that, the cap hit. What is the cap hit for Kirk? And then
Yep.
how does that hamper the Vikings with free agency and everything?
Yeah, so I mean, Kirk has a 35 million base salary, and then he has 10 million from the signing bonus proration. So it's a 45 million dollar cap hit this year. They could obviously extend him, and I think that's the most likely scenario. Um, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of that, just because I don't think another 3 years of him is going to be useful for anybody. But yeah, I don't see them paying him $45 million for 1 year to just let him walk away. Uh, I mean, he's been franchise tagged twice in his career, so the franchise tag would be insanely expensive to try to do that for her third time in his career. So that's not really an option. So it's either an extension or a trade as the most likely two scenarios. And I mean, the trade scenarios, obviously, after today's news, are starting to light up on Twitter, and everybody's kind of hopeful. That's not a huge Kirk Cousins fan. Is kind of hopeful that it goes through. I still would probably say it's about 75% chance he gets a 3 to 4 year extension with the Vikings, and that's what they roll with going forward.
Yeah. What would Vikings Twitter be like? If he does get that extension, it's got to be crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, Vikings Twitter is nuts pretty much. No matter what happens with Kirk, there's going to be a huge reaction, an extension or a trade. There's going to be everybody on both sides. There's going to be a lot of happiness and a lot of sadness, no matter what happens with him. Uh, yeah, I would say the fan base seems to be slightly more on the side of getting rid of Kirk than keeping him. But that might just be the kind of the vocal minority also speaking up on social media.
Yeah, I was just trying to think as a Bears fan, like as a comp, and I wonder if Jay Cutler is almost the comp for Kirk, just a
Oh yeah.
similar kind of thing.
No, yeah, that's actually a great comparison. It's the quarterback that can make every throw you need. But then, I mean, you guys obviously saw Jay Cutler just quit on it. Seems like quit on the team in the playoffs and just like doesn't care.
Mm-mm.
And I mean, that's what you see with Kirk. I mean, occasionally you'll see him get fired up, but it's so rare that it's just hard to see him as your guy. And yeah, I mean, Jay Cutler to me is an exactly perfect example.
So we talked about free agents. What are some like targets that you see them kind of going after now, and maybe some really glaring needs?
Yeah, I think that the first one's going to be Brandon Sheriff, the guard from Washington. He's the number one guard available. It's been a huge issue for the Vikings. We have Oli Udo in there, who's a tackle that they pushed into guard. He's just not. He's not an NFL quality offensive lineman. I don't think at any position, but definitely not at a guard position. We have a weakness at center as well with Garrett Bradbury, but I don't think there are any centers that are really. You have Ryan Jensen, I think, from Tampa Bay, that's out there. He could be an option, as on an offensive line as well. And then on the other side of things, likely switch into a 3-4 defense, some defensive linemen. A name you're familiar with, Akeem Hicks, I think is the number one target on defensive line. I'd love to see him as a 3-4 defensive end. I think he's strong in the five, as a 3-5 technique kind of defensive tackle. So I think he'd be a strong defensive end in that defense. Having him and Daniil Hunter as outside linebacker behind him would be exciting. You also have a Calais Campbell. It depends on if they really want to go for it. If they want to try to really go for a championship this year, bring back Kirk. You sign something like Akeem Hicks and Calais Campbell on the defensive line. I think we bring back Anthony Barr as an outside linebacker, and you have Daniil Hunter there as an outside linebacker. That defense is going to have a strong pass rush, and that's something that's been a weakness. So it really depends on how aggressive they want to be and how quickly they want to compete for a championship. If you want to go Ram style and just go for it, I think they bring in big names like that. If not, then you might see some lower end guards and a defensive tackle or defensive end here and there brought in. They're going to need some more linebackers as well. One kind of guard I had written down was Austin Corbett from the Rams, just because he has so much familiarity with the system, obviously, and I think Kevin O'Connell can kind of plug him in right away at right guard, and that's the biggest glaring weakness on that offense. So that's something that could be a sneaky kind of lower end, not that high end, offensive line contract that you're going to pay, but you got to get a guy a little bit cheaper on that day 3 or 4 free agency that can really fit in and make an impact. So those are really, the line play and maybe a linebacker. I don't see that many quarterbacks out there that I don't think they want to pay another high end quarterback. We have to bring back Patrick Peterson, who's a Viking free agent, and seems like he wants to come back. But I think that could be another kind of mid-level free agent signing as a cornerback that might be out there to kind of help them fill in that secondary.
So, how many pieces would you say they are away from playoffs or maybe even Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean that's the hardest part because I can list 6-7 holes on this team right now.
Hmm.
It seems like they're close, but then they also had a losing record in the last couple of years,
Hmm.
and you're like, well, that makes sense now because I mean you're missing probably a center, a right guard. You're missing right now. I mean the tight end Irv Smith's been injured. Conklin it might not be back. I mean, that could be a huge glaring hole as well. Linebacker is going to be a huge issue. We have two linebackers, Barr, which is a free agent, and Kendricks, who's a great middle linebacker. But then you need two more if you're going to switch into a 3-4. Are you moving Danielle Hunter back there? If so, then really you need two DNs. The defensive line is not a strength right now for this team, especially when Danielle Hunter has been injured the last 2 years. Um, we need another starting cornerback, probably a nickel cornerback. I mean, it's bad. You have the two safeties on defense, and you have, I mean, yeah, like Kendricks as a middle linebacker, and I feel like the entire all the other positions in the defense are just kind of a question mark. Are they going to bring back Pierce and Tomlinson both down on the defensive tackle, or are they going to let one of them go? I mean, there's just a lot of questions on the defense and then the offensive line. So there are a lot of holes for a team that seems like they're close to be competing.
Yeah, I mean, you looked at obviously we kind of I within our NFC North pod we talked about just the who if Aaron Rodgers left who would fill in and the Vikings. I mean, on paper, offensively at least they have the talent. Defensively in the past they've been better. There were a lot of question marks last year. You kind of you look at it and they should be the one to step up, but if they've got a lot of holes, you just not you don't know where they're going to go.
Yeah, and that's for me. That's why I'm so relieved that Rick Spielman is no longer here. He
Mhm.
got a lot of credit because he's had some successes in the draft with like Diggs and Hunter and some other guys like that. But you look at this roster, and it's not a complete roster. I mean, there's just not. There's a lot of high end talent. There's a lot of expensive players. You have like Harrison Smith and Kendricks, guys that are the
Mhm.
highest paid at their position, and they're great names. But then the areas around it, there's just so many holes on this team, and even running a 4-3 defense, you didn't have three linebackers that were NFL quality last year. It's just there's just so many holes on this team, and then we continue to just kind of roll out the dice and say, okay, we're going to compete again this year. And it's like, do we need to go through an actual rebuild? That's the biggest decision we're waiting to see right now is from this front office is, are we going to go out there again and try to compete with Kirk? Or are we going to do a rebuild, trade him away and start over?
Well, talking about starting over, what are your expectations for number one, this Kevin O'Connell and the coaching staff, and then and then we can kind of get into maybe even the front office and your expectations and trust there.
Yeah, I love the coaching staff they put together. Kevin O'Connell is, what he's going to do with the offense with Justin Jefferson and Cook. I'm just excited to see what they're going to do. No matter who's at quarterback, I think it's going to be an exciting offense. I think there's just too many weapons to not be. And it's been so stale the last 5 years with Zimmer and just the way he wants to run the ball more all the time. Even if they're getting 2 yards a carry, the first thing he says for the halftime reporter is we haven't run the ball enough. And so we're excited to kind of see what Kevin O'Connell could do to open that up. And I also like the way they did it similar to what the Rams did with McVay. They brought in a 65-year-old defensive coordinator and Ed Donatel. And, this guy's been around a lot. It's his fourth defensive coordinator job. He's been around the NFL for 25 years. He just knows kind of the ins and outs and somebody to kind of help him as that calming presence. Just like Wade Phillips back in the day with Kevin O'Connell or with the Rams back with McVay.
Mhm.
And then also, speaking of Wade Phillips, they hired his son as the offensive coordinator, which is exciting, I think, for the tight end spot because Wes Phillips has a history of coaching tight ends. And I'm curious to see what he's going to do with Irv Smith if he can come back healthy. He has a dynamic pass catching tight end. So it's exciting to see if they can fit him in the offense and make some exciting schemes for him. He could be a breakout player this year that can easily put up a lot of yardage. And I mean, we've had no production from the tight end in the red zone area, or not that we're used to seeing. From Rudolph for years, we had that kind of tight end, the pass catching touchdown tight end. I think that's something that can be exciting in the red zone is what we're going to do with Irv Smith and kind of with Wes Phillips' history there.
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, I have a dynasty team, and as a Bears fan, it was just perplexing to me how I could carry two Vikings tight ends this year. Irv Smith, picked up, and then I had Conklin. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? I've got two Vikings tight ends.
I mean, I like Conklin a lot, but he's just not. I mean, he's a solid pass catcher, but he is not a dynamic player. At least in my opinion, I think he's the guy that can kind of go out there and do a job solidly, but he's not something you're getting that excited about.
Yeah, so I had one of my shout out to Cowboys podcaster Everything Goes, and he had tweeted out frustration that they had tagged Dalton Schultz and listed all of these tight ends that are there, and obviously Conklin was on there, and I said, really, who do you want as opposed to Schultz? Obviously, there's a big number for Schultz because of the cap or because of the franchise tag, but really you definitely don't want, as a Bears fan, I know you don't want Jimmy Graham, you
No.
know, and you don't, and as you said, Tyler Conklin's not the guy either, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess some people will see some stats, and he had some surprising numbers. I think to some people to know who he was, but yeah, he's not the guy that's going to open up the offense for you and make an exciting play. I would much rather have Dalton Schultz than Conklin. That's not even a question.
Well, speaking of a player that I think many other teams would rather have than their running back, Dalvin Cook. Talk about him and obviously his injury history and maybe his future with the team. I mean, is he going to be there long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's another one that could easily be traded away. But I just don't think there's a lot of huge market for aging running backs. So it's not like you're going to get anything for him. So I think he is more valuable on the team than off. And if they don't plan on rebuilding, it's a guy you have to bring back. The offense is so much better with him on the field. Madison's a solid runner. He just doesn't make the plays that Cook does. He's not the home run hitter. He's not the guy that's going to go out there and make the 80-yard touchdown. Um, Not that you expect that every time from a running back, but it's always a possibility with Cook on the field. He's so dynamic. It's exciting when he gets the ball in space. It gets your heart going a little bit. You're excited to see him out there. He's so dynamic. I'm really excited to see what Kevin O'Connell could do with him and get him the ball more in space. So many times the Vikings were running the ball behind their terrible interior offensive line and going nowhere. And Cook had to break 3 tackles to get 5 yards, kind of thing. So I'm excited to see what they can do to get him out in space and get him out of the middle and all that, and kind of the muck in the middle, especially with the weakness in the offensive line. I think he's a player that's going to make a huge impact, and with him and Jefferson with the new coaching staff, I think you have to keep both of them around at least for the next couple of years to see what they can do.
And speaking of that, like, how much longer will Madison be around? I mean, 'cause he did well, in his starts.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a guy that's probably going to be gone after his rookie deal.
Mhm,
I don't think you can re-sign him. I think he's going to want a bigger role somewhere. He's
mhm.
probably going to get a low end starter money from somebody, and I don't think that's reasonable for the Vikings to expect to pay Cook and Madison. There is a chance at the end of this year they let Cook go or trade him and then keep Madison around, which I wouldn't be a fan of, but that's always a possibility. I mean, it really depends on Cook's injury history too. If he can play a full season, I think there's no way they can let him go. But if he's out 6 games this year, I could see them just moving on. And if it's a another 8 and 9, 9 and 8 season, maybe they just let him go and kind of move on. But I think Madison is probably going to be gone after this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of decisions, this year and even next year for the Vikings. What they're going to do, and what do you expect? From and do you trust Kwesi Adofo-Mensah? This year and kind of going forward, and what do you expect from him in his first draft?
Yeah, I have no idea really what to expect with him. Yeah, I'm excited with the hire. I think it's exciting to see somebody with a different perspective come in and not have that, the guy that's been in NFL for 40 years come in and try to manage it. It's exciting to see what he's going to do with the cap space and what the analytics say for him about Kirk Cousins and what kind of cap space they can give him. I mean, it can go one of two ways. It could be a draft day trade with Kirk, and they're picking a quarterback, or it could be a kind of shoring up the holes, and I would expect a cornerback pick in round 1 then, and then some offensive line help coming in the later rounds. So it's really curious. I mean, everything with this team just revolves around Kirk. It's really what are they going to do with him? And if they're keeping him around, you fill the holes. And if they're not, then you're kind of building you getting your quarterback and your offensive line in, and you're really starting to build around a new guy.
Yeah. So were they picking this year in the first round?
I think we're already. Well, I'm blanking on that now. I think we're in somewhere around 14 or something like that, somewhere in the teens there. Where it's not going to be in a spot where you can get your quarterback. It's something. It would have to be a trade up, or if we're doing a draft day trade. I know Carolina there's been rumors floating around with Carolina. Maybe you can move up to a top 10 pick there and get a quarterback. But yeah, where they're picking, they're in the I'm pretty sure it's 14. It's not a pick where you're going to get that young quarterback. So it could be it would have to come in a trade in that scenario.
Well, and the reason I asked as well, I'm an Iowa guy, and you said that the Vikings would need a center. Linderbaum, I mean, it'd be
He'd be a great.
fantastic there.
Yeah, he would be a great pick. I would certainly not be opposed to them going with a center at round 1 and then moving with a quarterback to a DB in round 2. I think that would be a really strong pick. It really would be.
Do you think, just, I mean, kind of off the top of your head with like draft wise, if they decide to keep Kirk, it would maybe be like offensive line or something. And maybe if they decide to move on from him, it might be something else, another piece, maybe not even a quarterback or.
Yeah. I mean, I could almost see them going with offensive line either way in that scenario. I don't think you go out and get a DB round 1 if you're moving on from Kirk, because I think you did that. I think that's something you got to pick up later and develop. I think offensive line might be the role if you're going to have a new quarterback come in, like a new taking Kirk out. Mm-hmm. I think you have to have an offensive line to protect him. It's been a very poor offensive line the last 5 years here, and pressure up the middle for any young quarterback is going to be just not a winning scenario. So I think they would go offensive line in that scenario if they don't go with a new quarterback.
Yeah, and so I did also want to touch base as a Bears fan. Is there any truth that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was their second choice to Ryan Poles or?
That was the rumor, floating around on Twitter. It wasn't really verified by anybody. I think it's really hard to tell there. Of course, they're not going to say that he was their second choice. It's always, we got our guy, no matter who you sign.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance he was the second choice, and it's not a bad fallback plan. I think they got the coach they wanted. If we're going down that route, I don't think they really wanted Jim Harbaugh. I think they brought him in to kind of kick the tires and see what was happening, and that kind of he came in with a bad attitude, and they just kind of sent him on his way. I don't think that was the like with them. I think they got their first choice in the coach, but with the GM, I think they might have gotten the second choice, and that happens, and I don't think it's a huge deal either. I think to me that was the correct choice. I would rather have Kwesi than Ryan Poles, but that's just my personal preference on somebody coming with a better analytical background and kind of a newer view on things.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the proof will be in the pudding, however it kind of shakes out for both teams. And you look at that, and the Bears also had, at least some fans that had their eye on Jim Harbaugh. And I mean, what were your thoughts kind of thinking going through that? I mean, he's can be a polarizing figure either way. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think with him, the results are so strong. It's hard not to like him. What he did in San Francisco was impressive. I think he had a terrible GM to work with Trent Baalke, and it really ruined that dynamic. But I mean, he was winning. He had him in a Super Bowl with a chance to win. I mean, you can't argue with that. Baalke is known to be a cheap GM that doesn't keep around his veteran players and doesn't really get along with coaches. He's doing a terrible job in Jacksonville. So I think he had a bad GM with him, and I was excited to see him in purple. If they had hired him, I would have been thrilled. When he was coming in, he was my number one choice personally, because I was that excited about his history, and he wins everywhere he goes. He's winning in Michigan. He's winning everywhere. It's just a history of winning. But yeah, I think it makes sense what happened. He kind of came in with from what the reports, he came in with kind of a attitude that he'd already had the job, and this was just the formality. And they were actually bringing him to do a full interview, and I think he just came in with a not prepared. This is my job, and then obviously they sent him back home. I would have been thrilled with him though if they did hire him.
I say, and the rest is Vikings meme history as well. That was a crazy, crazy day for Vikings memes.
Yeah, the interesting pictures floating around on Twitter from Harbaugh were fun, and I think there are a lot of devastated fans out there when he didn't get signed.
Yeah, and when you look at it, the other side of the ball, then well, we've been talking about offense, and what are some key defensive needs? You said are they completely shifting the scheme then, or what are they going to be running now?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're going to be going with a 3-4. Ed Donatel has run both as a defensive coordinator. I think he ran a 4-3 in Jacksonville and one of his other locations he was at. But it sounds like they're going to go with 3-4. I think that's his preferred scheme. I don't think the Vikings are particularly loaded or ready to go to that. And I think that the roster is you're going to be lacking at least two linebackers, and that's if they bring back Anthony Barr. And if they don't, then you're looking at the three new linebackers essentially is what they're going to need.
Mm-hmm.
And then I mean their defensive end scenario is questionable. I mean you have Daniil Hunter there who's strong. He can play a D end in a 3-4 defense. I'd prefer him an outside linebacker, but then if you move him from the D line, you're basically going to need two defensive ends. You'll have a defensive tackle in the middle. That's fine. You'll have Kendricks in the middle linebacker spot. That's fine. But you'll need another one next to him. And then, there's so many holes on that. It does worry me a bit if they're trying to compete this year to think that they can get three starting quality linebackers in. And if you move Hunter back there and sign Barr, I guess you only need one. But then you really need D line help. So there's a lot of holes. There's at least three or four holes in there to fill immediately. And then also your cornerback spot is suspect. You have a number one cornerback if they bring back Patrick Peterson, but then you're going to need another cornerback. You're going to need a slot cornerback. There's a lot of holes in this defense.
Yeah, and you look at the season. Obviously, we're before free agency, or before kind of all that's shaken out and everything. What are your expectations? With a new system and everything. In the NFL, it's what have you done for me lately? Obviously, it's not for long, all that stuff. And what are your expectations going into the season? Just to say, okay, this is a step forward for the franchise.
Yeah, I think my expectations are for them to compete for a playoff spot. I think they have the talent to compete for the division if things go well. They can compete with Green Bay. I think that would have to be a perfect scenario for them. Most likely scenario for me is a wild card spot. 10 wins, something like that would be a realistic expectation and a step forward. I think the offense is going to be more exciting and dynamic than it has been. I worry a lot about the defense. I don't think they're a top half defense. I think they're like I would put them in the mid 20s if I'm ranking defenses in the NFL right now. I'm interested to see what Ed Donatel does to kind of scheme. Anthony Barr, unfortunately, he's a free agent because his entire career I felt like he should have been a 4-3 outside linebacker. He's great at rushing the passer. He's not that great in coverage. I think he's going to be a player that can break out if they do bring him back. I'm excited to see Daniil Hunter and see what he can do on defense too. So my expectations are that they'll figure that out and at least be a middling defense. And I think it's going to be a high level offense. And I think that'll get you, 10, 11 wins in a wild card spot.
If I was to tell you, we fast forward a year and the Vikings made the Super Bowl, what would you say was the main reason they got there?
I mean, it's probably the same for any NFL team, but it's the quarterback play. Kirk Cousins stepped up. That means he's being aggressive, making those deep passes and hitting Jefferson and ISM on those deep passes. He's moving the chains better. He's maintaining possession. The offense is elite. I would expect to be a top 3 offense in that scenario, and then a middling defense. They figured it out on defense good enough to hold a playoff team to 20, 25 points and have the offense score 30 and win the game. I don't think I can't see a scenario where the defense is the one that's leading you to the championship. It would have to be an offensive attack there.
And it's so interesting. I'm sure that's weird to kind of think about. I mean, as a Bears fan, I know we're not there yet. Fields is still developing, but when you think about the NFC, it is a lot more wide open, especially, we'll see what happens with the Rams and everything. It's a lot more wide open than the AFC, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean the AFC has so many strong quarterbacks. It's
Mhm.
hard to. I mean the AFC West alone is enough to scare anybody away from that entire conference. So, um, yeah, I mean you have the Rams who are obviously going to come back strong. You have San Francisco if they can get a quarterback, they can be a team that's competing for a championship. Obviously Green Bay is up at that level, but then it gets thin really quick after that. If you're good enough to be 4-5 in a conference, you're good enough to win a couple games and get to the Super Bowl. So definitely excited about the opportunities there are in the NFC because the AFC. I mean, you have to have just elite level quarterback play just to compete for a wild card. It seems like with as many as they have out there.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season again. Lots to kind of shake out still as far as team wise and player wise, but things are starting to dominoes with Russell Wilson going to the AFC. Um, it still remains to be seen, and I give a hard time to all my Packer friends about Rodgers. I mean, yeah, he's a fantastic regular season quarterback, but you got to do it in the playoffs. Number one, but the question I had too is he always seems to does he always seem to lose at least one game to the Vikings?
Yeah, they've been able to get a couple wins even with these bad teams they've had the last 2 years. They've been able to get a couple wins against Green Bay, and even on the road in Green Bay they've won. They're not, like I said, they're not a team that scares me. If the Vikings are good and competing, I don't think Green Bay is the team that stands in their way of going to a Super Bowl. I think it's all about can they improve enough to compete with the Rams and 49ers and some of the other teams. Whether they win a division or not, it really doesn't. I mean, Green Bay has, like you said, a fantastic regular season. The playoffs, they're just not that great. Aaron Rodgers is not he's a Hall of Fame quarterback because of what he does in the regular season, not because of what he's done in the postseason. I think he's a mediocre playoff quarterback, which sounds weird to say about Aaron Rodgers, as great as he
Hmm.
is, but he just doesn't come through. You know, the thought process in my mind, I was like, well, he's like Kirk Cousins, but with a shit ton more talent. So it was
Yeah.
like, obviously he has won it. So that's something that the Vikings have never done. So they always like to point out, well, he only has one Super Bowl, and we would take that one Super Bowl in a minute. But
Hmm.
he's just not. You watch him in the playoffs, and I mean, this past year when they got knocked out, you don't see him. You're like, oh, that Hall of Fame quarterback just got knocked out because his defense wasn't good enough. You're just like, oh, he didn't come through.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. They've got a ton of holes to fill as well. And when I think of teams, you know, living in Minnesota for 10 years, I definitely got the a chance to kind of hear a lot from the fan base, and actually coincidentally now I live in Wisconsin, so it's here now from the Packers as well. But I had a chance to go to the Bears, and we talked about this offline, to the Bears and a Vikings game at US Bank Stadium. I actually also went to the Final Four game, and I have to say that is really a fantastic stadium, and it really is one of the best, if not better, if not best, in-game products as far as like a total atmosphere. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a nice stadium. I've been to the new one here in Atlanta. I've been to the one out
Mm.
in Dallas. I'm excited to go to Vegas and LA to see their new stadiums, but it's the best stadium I've ever been to in any sport. There's not a bad seat in the house. I've sat in the upper deck. I sat in the lower bowl. It doesn't matter. It's a great seat. There's no bad seat. The cool background of having the city through the glass doors is awesome. Seeing the 60% of the roof is that clear kind of roof that lets in the light, natural sunlight, but you're still sheltered from that Minnesota weather that nobody wants to sit in. It's such a great product. They do a great job with all the kind of fanfare, the Vikings horn and that whole thing. They do a great job of getting the crowd into it.
Mhm.
The first home Vikings game I ever saw was at the Metrodome when they played Carolina, and it was a dull kind of. It wasn't a great product on the field that day. They lost,
That
but
was a
it wasn't a great product
terrible.
by the
Yeah.
whole Vikings as an organization getting fans involved and exciting. So to see what they've done with the new stadium is amazing. I think the fan base has always been passionate, has been there. So to see that stadium kind of match the fans is awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it was really cool. They did the fake snow and everything, and
Yeah.
and that was a cool just atmosphere that they added to it. And but the question is, I mean, among fans, was there frustration that they didn't go ahead and do like an outdoor stadium just for the elements and all of that, like, Green Bay and just to match, the area or anything like that?
Yeah, I think you have those diehard football fans that wish they did that because it makes it difficult on the opposing team coming in, and I think that does get overplayed a little bit in fans' minds more than the players. Most of those players aren't from Minnesota, so they're not used to it either. You're getting these guys are here 3-4 years, like you said, not for long in the NFL. It's not like they're living here their entire lives and they're used to the cold, and the opponents aren't. It's I think that's overplayed, but I think there are a lot of especially your old school Vikings fans that want to see them play outdoors. Back before the Metrodome when they were playing outdoors, I think they want to see the Purple People just come back and playing on the snow. And you had Bud Grant going out there with short sleeves on and toughing it out. That's just not the reality of the NFL anymore. These guys move around too much. It's not to me. I'm glad they put it indoors because I don't want to go up there and sit in 0-degree weather and watch a football game. But there are a lot of kind of old school fans that wish they would have built an outdoor stadium.
Yeah, and I'm not one of them. I mean, I living in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and I mean you kind of get used to the cold weather, but you want to enjoy the product, and with the product, I mean, especially with the Vikings, having one of, I mean, at least a top 5 wide receiver, if not top 3, Jefferson. You want to have just as much to add as much as you can to the offense, and sometimes those outdoor snowy games you don't know what you're going to get from a product.
Yeah, absolutely. This team is built for the inside too. Yeah, you said with Jefferson, with Cook, with Wangwu coming in now, you have a team that should be fast and exciting. I would hate to see them slowed down by the snow when you have to pound it out. I mean, that's that Mike Zimmer philosophy that we've been watching for 5 years. It's been a horrible fit for this talent on this roster. So it was exciting to see, or I'm glad that they have that indoor stadium because I wouldn't want to see them and then with it in the middle of a blizzard trying to throw deep past the Jefferson.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be another interesting season within the division, and I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about your Vikings. And where can everyone find you again?
Yeah, I write for the Daily Norseman and Purple PTSD. I haven't been writing as much lately. I took a couple months off after the season, but I should be a lot more active on Purple PTSD, if I can say it correctly. Writing some articles coming up here in the next month or two. We have a daily thread on the Daily Norseman that I'm usually on, kind of interacting with everybody on the site as well. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Georgia Skull, GA Skull, actually. So at Georgia GA Skull.
Awesome. Actually, one last question as well. Are you worried at all about the Lions?
No, I don't think anybody in the history of the NFL has ever been worried about the Lions.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good. Yeah, I mean, the Lions are a team that I wouldn't mind see doing well. Especially
absolutely.
the Bears weren't doing well, but it's been an interesting franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one you just feel bad for. I mean, they never could put it together. You had an all-time great in Barry Sanders and an all-time great in Calvin Johnson. They never could do anything with either one, and they both retired early because the team was so bad and they just got fed up with it. So, yeah, that's that one franchise everybody just feels bad for. I'd almost rather be a Jaguars fan than a Lions fan.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully there might be some hope, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean they have cap space. They have everything. Oh, who knows? They can turn around eventually, but they never seem to. As bad as we feel as Vikings fans for never winning a championship, at least we've been there a few times, unlike the Lions.
That's true. Well, thanks again, Craig. I definitely appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to connect again.
Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate it.